This conference will now be recorded.
Welcome back again to our basic navigation training series of videos here for Duct. I am going to go back into our training area and open up our layout, which we created. I'm going to have that cleaned out. So now we're going to talk about drawing duct, and that means we've got to talk about both the point and the draw modes. Now we're going to put ourselves in point mode first. So to understand, to begin to draw, you're going to need some basic navigation and layout manipulation controls first. So first thing we want to do is select a material or product line. Now, US Duct product line, you can talk with your duct guy about what these are for. I'm going to use rolled lip, which is found in the US Duct line there. And I also need to choose an initial diameter. I'm just going to choose 4 to draw with. I tend to draw with a small diameter, and then I use DuctQuote's automatic sizing of the duct later in the calculation tab. You'll hear about that in a later video. All right, so again, let's talk about our controls. Well, I can use my scroll wheel to zoom in and out, and that's going to be important to allow us to frame the part of the drawing that we're actually working on. The other, if I left click and drag, you can see that I can rotate and tilt this layout. Okay, that's a left click and drag. If I right click and drag, you'll notice that I can move the layout around, but there is no rotation. Okay, so those are the basic navigational or manipulation tools. Okay, so we're going to have to set a beginning point or starting point. So I'm going to zoom in, and again, I'm going to select point mode. And one of the things you notice right away is that you have the ability to type in an actual coordinate for your starting point. I will suggest start off using your mouse instead. This, unless you have a really good mind for three-dimensional geometry, can be a little tricky, but you'll see me use it a little bit later in this series. But you'll notice that I get the X and the Z coordinates are actually showing themselves as I move around on this grid. Okay, so we can move off here into the corner. I'm going to click there just at 6 inches by 6 inches, right there in the corner. And then I can move up. And I'm just going to start this at 5 feet. And I click a second time, and that gives me a starting point. If I now select draw mode, and again, we make sure we've selected the appropriate material and an initial diameter. So we're going to move the cursor over, and I'm going to hover over that starting point. And a couple of things happen that are important. First, you see a green box. That is DuctQuote telling you that it recognizes this is a valid starting point from which it can draw duct. The second is, in draw mode, it will actually show you the three-dimensional coordinates of that point. And you can see that it's 5 feet off the floor. That's the y-axis. And the z and the x are both at 6 inches. If I click once, you'll see that guidelines appear. Now, this is going to be true throughout DuctQuote, and that is that those guidelines are color coordinated, as you see are the coordinates being displayed. So now if I move my cursor along one of these guidelines, like so, or so, or so, you see I get duct. Now, another thing to notice that is important is you'll notice a thin green line dropping from the end of the duct that I am pulling along. That lets me know exactly where I am in the grid. So just to start this, I'm actually going to go up, and I'm moving along. I can click and stop. So right here, you'll see there's an L, and it's changing. That is the length that I am drawing. So we're going to go until it says 3 feet. And there it is, right about there. Now I can also zoom in, and you'll notice red arrows. Those red arrows indicate airflow direction. Now, airflow direction is going to be very important in duct quote. We'll get into it more. But there's two assumptions. First, that the direction in which I drew from that naked starting point, duct quote assumes that is the direction of airflow. The other assumption is that vertical duct carries air up. You do, however, have control over that. But again, we'll get into that in a later video. Let's go ahead and draw another section. I'm going to click again on the end, and you'll notice I get guidelines. I can move along here, and notice at the top of the screen it's saying I can type in a length. So let's tell it that I need to move, say, 12 feet. And if I hit the Enter key, there we go. I get a 12-foot long section. Two things have happened. Number one, I got the 12 feet of duct. And if I go into edit mode, you also see I've got an elbow. And I moved that at a 90 degrees, so I got a 90-degree elbow. If in edit mode, I click on this section, if I ever want to check the actual length of a section, I select it, and I can look right over here on our control panel, and you can see it gives me 12 feet or 144 inches. Okay? So back in draw mode, if we hover again, click, and let's say that we're going to move along in this direction, and this time we're going to go, let's say, 15 feet. Okay? You'll notice that that went very nicely as well. And let's say that this is now coming down to a collector of some kind. So if we now go down, and let's say that this collector is going to be connecting at, let's say, 52 inches right there. So I can stop. Now please note that one of those assumptions kicked in about airflow. This is why I say airflow is very important. I'm going to go in edit mode for just a moment. Take note that the airflow is going up, but if we compare to this section, the airflow is supposed to come down to our collector, and this is very simply fixed. We select that section, and here we have two circling arrows that will switch the airflow direction of the section that we have selected. I click it, and there we get our wonderful elbow. Okay? So, you've seen us draw. You'll notice that we can tell the system how far, or we can manually move the cursor, and a second click will stop that. One thing that I haven't told you about, and that is if we start to draw something and we no longer want that to be finished, we can stop one of two ways. We can either hit the escape key on our keyboard, or with the exact same effect, I can simply, before I left click again to finish that section, if I right click, it will stop that. Well, guess what? Now you're drawing duct. You can start to make rudimentary systems that contain all 90-degree turns. I haven't talked about how to make other types of turns, but if you'll watch the next segment on upstream versus downstream and drawing at angles, you'll learn how to do that. So thanks for watching. Watch our next video.